Ladies and gentlemen, I bought this watch back in 2018. We'd been through some ups and some downs together, and ultimately it's what gave me the spur to start making videos on YouTube and start watch collecting proper. Before then I'd owned Casio watches, and that was pretty much my lot in life, Casio or nothing. But then I bought this watch, and then I got turned over to the world of mechanical automatic watches, and I started learning a little bit more about the watch market. So this is the first watch that I bought. I've had it for coming up to 4 years now. So what do I think of it? Do I still rate it as a watch? Should I sell it? What do you guys think I should do? Hello everyone, welcome back to the VW channel. I hope you are all safe and well. Today we're going to be having a look at the first watch that I used properly to launch this channel way back when it was a really grainy mobile phone. I don't even think it was an iPhone, I think it was a Huawei or something like that, in order to launch this channel. And I've had this watch ever since. It's been a faithful companion, but over the last 6 months or so, I've been wearing it less and less. I took it with me on holiday to Corfu, and actually I did wear it quite a lot then to go swimming with. But since coming back to the UK, I've been wearing my Mido more as a diver. I've been wearing my Black Bay much more than I've been wearing this watch. But I still look at it every so often and I still like it, but I'm not sure what to do with it. So, you know, I just want your advice really. What do you think I should do? Well, before we do that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go over the watch so that you know a little bit more about, what the hell I'm talking about today. Now, this watch is the Orient Triton, or as some people call it, the Orient Neptune. It was first released, I think, in 2017. I bought mine in 2018, towards the back end of 2018, so coming up to 4 years now. And I've been wearing it on and off as my daily for about 2 years. And then in the last 2 years, I've not really worn it as much as I ought to. So where do I start with this watch? I think I'll start with the specifications. So this is a 43.4mm diameter dial. It's got a thickness of 13.6 millimeters, 40-hour power reserve with a power reserve indicator on the watch. It is an automatic movement as well, and it's powered by one of Orient's more premium movements as well that you tend to get on their saturation divers. So the fact that you're able to get it for, at the time, under £300, this watch is being discontinued, I thought was an incredible piece of equipment and incredible value for money. The lug width of this watch is 22mm, which is a very common size, and the design of this watch was sort of like a classier version of the SKX, and in fact in some ways upgraded, because it hacks, it hand winds, and it has a flat piece of sapphire crystal over the top of the dial. Now, at the time you could get the watch in 3 different colorways: a blue dial, a black dial with white indices, and a black dial with some sort of gold style gilt. This is really where my love of gilt dials came in, because I bought the black with the gold bezel and the gilt on it as well. It wasn't quite two-tone, but it had a two-tone-esque look. And the thing that really brought me or sold me on this watch was actually watching a review at the time from TGV when he was talking about this watch. Other features of this watch is that it doesn't have a date matched a color date matched wheel, but it has a date wheel of normal proportions, and it was at the 4 o'clock mark. It was an ISO certified divers watch, so it was a divers 200 meters certified watch, and the loom on this watch was nigh on incredible. It was absolutely outstanding. fact, out of all the specifications, the only thing that really let the watch down for it, in my opinion, was the bracelet. The bracelet was solid, and it was a solid bracelet, but was push pins, which I don't have too much of a problem with, and it was solid end links, and it did have female links. That all was fine, but the clasp was a little naff, to put it nicely. It was a fold over security pressed clasp, which is fine. I don't mind those at all. But after a few months of constant wear, the buckle was very stiff, and you could tell that it wasn't quite right. The metal wasn't working pretty well, and that's where the first problem I sort of had with this watch came up. I switched it out for a NATO style strap, which is one of the things that I wanted to do at the time to see if that would work. Luckily, this watch has drilled lugs, so it made it so much easier to do. Inevitably, as always happens, you know, your taste sort of change as things go along. And I had a lot of Garda watches at the time, and then I started looking at other style dive watches. I had a few of the AliExpress watches which I was wearing to sort of see what would suit me. I had a few Pagani designs. I had an Addy's dive as well, which is the Captain Willard, which became one of my go-to sort of everyday watches. And then I bought the Mido Ocean Star, and that really sort of changed things a little bit for me. In fact, what it did is it made the Mido was felt like it was a much better quality and better built watch, which of course it is. You're paying, you know, almost 3 times the money that you would pay for an Orient Triton for a Mido, because it's a Swiss watch. However, there were certain things that weren't as good. The loom wasn't as good on the Mido. It didn't feel anywhere near as bulletproof as the Triton did. It felt really well made, and it felt competent, but it didn't quite feel, you know, as hard, like a tank, which is what the Orient really feels like. It feels like a tank or some sort of heavy duty vehicle that can sort of manage any terrain. And so I was thinking for a while, you know, what do I do to sort of, you know, get myself back in love with this watch? And at the time, the only thing that I could think of was, well, let's have a look at the bracelet. So I had a look at different vendors. I went to Uncle Seiko first, and although I would later pick up one of their bracelets for the Dress KS or the SRPE, as I call it, I didn't go for it with the Triton with the Uncle Seiko, and it's because Uncle Seiko are good at making it, you know, vintage style, but they're not really good at doing something that I would think, you know, is pretty hardcore divers, you know, a tank of a bracelet that's going to mix in with an absolute bullet train of a watch, with a watch that is probably going to be bomb proof. So I stumbled across Strapcode, and I saw their bracelets. I saw how well engineered they were, and I picked one up. And I have to say, that really did transform the relationship that I had with the Orient Triton. And it went from being one of my least worn watches of 2021 to becoming, you know, one of the most worn watches that I had during the summer of 2022. And that was partly because I took it away with me for 6 to 7 weeks to Greece. Now, as my Instagram page will attest, I wore this pretty much every single time I went into the sea. I wore the Orient Triton, and it was a really faithful companion. I also wore the Mido Ocean Star as well, but the Mido Ocean Star didn't really fare up as well against the rocks and against the sands of Greece compared to the Orient Triton. To this day, the Mido Ocean Star has cracks all across its bezel that, you know, sort of give it a bit more character now, but it's a bit of a shame when you look at it and you think, well, it didn't really survive the rocks and the sand as much as I wanted it to. However, the Orient Triton looks as good as new, looks as good as the day I bought it. And that is in part because of how sturdy and how strong and how well built this watch really is. Another reason I wore it so often on holiday as well, is because I didn't take my Black Bay with me on holiday. And the reason why I did that is just because I didn't want to lose it. So whenever I go away on holiday, even though we tend to go to private apartments and we tend to go to private complexes and somewhere that, you know, it's very unlikely that somebody would break in, I'm still very aware that if I was to lose something like that watch, that piece of equipment, I would feel utterly devastated. And so I wanted to take something that didn't cost me anywhere near as much money, that was still looking good on my wrist, but would still last a while. And that's really where I landed on with the Orient Triton. But I also landed on that with the Mido, and I also wore the Hamilton, and I also took my G-Shock as well for when I was exercising. So the Triton filled a gap in the watch collection that almost didn't have a gap anymore, because I had so many different watches that would do the same thing. If I wanted to make my way for a diver's watch or a diver's style watch next time I go on holiday, I actually am thinking and leaning more towards going for a stainless steel bezel watch, like some of the Seiko models, some of the SPB models, or alternatively going for a GMT model instead. So something like the Christopher Ward GMT, which isn't too expensive, so if I lose it, I lose it, and it's not, you know, although it's sad, it's not the end of the world. But you've also got some of the other ones, such as the Monte Sky Quest GMT and some of the others that are good, you know, hardy dive watches. And when I think about those watches, it makes me a little sad, because I think to myself, you know, the Orient was a key component in getting my collection up and running. However, with the watches that I'm now wearing on a daily basis and the watches that I enjoy putting on my wrist, the Orient doesn't get a lot of wrist time anymore. And it's not by any means like a malicious thing. It's just that I see, well, you can't really be malicious to an inanimate object, but you can easily sort of feel a bit of sadness that the watch is just sort of sitting there and not being used. And that's the thing that sort of, I guess, irks me a little bit, is that I really love this watch. It's one of my favorite watches, I guess, within the collection, but I just don't really wear it so much anymore. So that's where my problem comes. You know, is it right just to keep a hold of a watch because you like it, because you like the look of it, but you're never really going to wear it anymore? Not because you're trying to protect it, but just because there are other watches that turn your eye and that you want to have on your wrist? Or is it better to sell the watch on to somebody else who's going to have that either as a one watch collection or a small 3-watch collection, and take a lot of care of it and nurture it and keep that watch for themselves and really look after it? That's the question, really. And that's what I wanted to upload this video for. You know, I think this watch is an incredible watch. The fact that it's been discontinued probably makes it a little more valuable, although I'm not really one for the economics of watch making and collecting. Although I do an MBA and I study economics, I try and stay away from the watch making side of it, because that would just drive me insane. And I've seen videos that people do on it and it does drive them insane. So I sort of steer clear of that. But really, I just want to know what the next step would be. You know, what would you do if you're in my situation?